it is acknowledged by no less than the Prime Minister, is indeed the only way in which his dream of financial inclusion for 200 to 300 million people can be made a practical reality. But it is startups which I think can change India most. I've seen a bit of it in Israel. I believe that startups in India can coexist with Indian businesses, the large and the small, and they will do so with global businesses too. And they offer us the best chance to make another one of our slogans a reality, and that is Startup India, Stand Up India. Thank you for your patience. I wish you well in your deliberations and look forward to receiving your conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, may I request the first set of panelists from the e-commerce track to come on stage.
I'll sit here and let you guys. Okay, cardio.
Let me begin by introducing the session. The first track today is on e-commerce. The notion that the East must look to the West for innovation holds little water today, with some of the leading unicorns being founded in Asia. We are delighted to bring together some of the leading names in e-commerce from India and Europe on stage today. Let me introduce the panelists. Our moderator today is Axel Ware. Axel is a principal at Firestarter, a firm that helps digital entrepreneurs take their companies from seed stage to Series A and beyond. Axel coordinates Firestarter's deal flow-related activities, including sourcing, diligence, and closing. Prior to Firestarter, Axel was in Bain Capital's private equity group, where he focused on LBOs, disposals, refinancings, and reorganizations across sectors. Our second panelist is David Wormsley. David is the director of M&S.com and is responsible for running the retailer's digital business. He oversees the development of the new multi-channel platforms for M&S, which lie at the heart of its plan to transform itself into a leading multi-channel retailer. David has spent over 20 years in the digital retail space, and he joined M&S in 2011 from Dixon's Retail Group, where he was director of e-commerce. Our third panelist is Aprameya Radhakrishna of Taxi for Sure. Aprameya co-founded Taxi for Sure in 2011. A fellow PGP 2008, he was the head of business development with JLL India before starting it. He has also worked with Infi as a software engineer for 3 years. In early 2015, Taxi for Sure was acquired by Ola Cabs for a cool $200 million. Apu, as he's fondly known by his batchmates, spends much of his time identifying angel investment opportunities now. And our final speaker is Kunal Shah of Snapdeal. Kunal started his career at a BPO startup. His first venture was named Paisaback, which provided cashback promotions for organized retailers. Recognizing the potential of the recharge business, he founded FreeCharge in 2010 with Sandeep Tandon. In April 2015, FreeCharge was acquired by Snapdeal for an estimated $450 million. FreeCharge is now one of the largest payment wallet services in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Swastik. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be moderating such a distinguished panel on a sector that's really at the heart of the incredible digital transformation that India is undergoing today. But before diving into conversation, I wanted to maybe remind the audience of a couple of the facts and figures that are out there on what's going on in India in the tech sector and in e-commerce in particular. And some of you may be familiar with these, but I think they really underscore the magnitude of the opportunity that's at stake. So, a third of incremental internet users globally in the next 5 years are expected to come from India. Beyond that, of the 300 million plus existing internet users in India in 2014, only a minority of those were actually in the customer base of the leading e-commerce players in India. And so the opportunity to build massive tech companies, both presently and in the future, is simply massive. In e-commerce in particular, we're really seeing a land grab which perhaps stems from the fact that India's online retail penetration stands at 0.6% versus above 8% in China and above 12% in the US. And that's perhaps why we have forecasts calling for the Indian e-commerce market to grow from around $10 billion today to $140 billion in the next 5 years. So I think those figures really highlight the magnitude of what's at stake here today. Before diving in, I thought I'd leave a minute to our panelists to perhaps tell us a bit more about what they've done, the businesses they've built or worked at, and let them introduce ourselves, and then we'll dive in.
Okay, I'll go first then. My name's David, as I was introduced, David from Marks & Spencer's. I've spent far too long working in the digital space, so the grey hair comes with the territory. Built my first website back in 1994. I love retail. I love everything about retail. It's my passion, and everything about technology. I think at M&S we've been on a particular journey. I joined the business 4.5 years ago. Marks & Spencer's was, by its own admission, slightly behind the curve in terms of all things e-commerce, but also all things digital, and with that, the digital mindset and the entrepreneurial mindset that's so important to all organizations these days. So we've been on quite a journey beyond the big technology programs, really transforming the culture within M&S to a much more agile, much more entrepreneurial mindset. It's a journey. We are a long way from done on that front, but we've made a start. And that's the fundamental for me. I see myself much more these days as a talent manager. My next job, I really want to be the HR director for Marks & Spencer's because I think that talent and how we find talent and how we nurture talent is really the thing that unlocks the digital opportunities in each of our businesses. It's all about the people. The technology is rational. The technology is simple. I can see my partner from TCS in the room. Technology is really simple. But really, actually, the challenge for us is finding the right people, finding, and I think we talk about unicorns, finding the superstars who can really drive our business forward. And it's worthwhile saying, actually, in terms of my business unit within M&S, there's about 700 people in the business unit, 400 of whom are based in India with our partners. And it's a fundamental way of working for me. And actually, we've got about 120 people who run the website from our offices in Pune. And there's probably about 4 people out of the 120 who are the absolute rock stars. And they just blow me away every time I see them and every time I meet with them. And I think I'd encourage all of us to think about the talents that we nurture and the talent that we identify in whatever we do in the walks of life we do, because it's probably in that kind of ratio, those 4 people out of that unit of 120 are the people who get me excited every time I meet with them and will drive my business forward. So that's my initial plea. Think about the people.
Great. So thanks a lot. This is my first time in London. Excited to be here. I'm a Prameya. I'm from Bangalore. I'm a 2008 graduate of IIMA Ahmedabad. I was in dorm 17. Room 14 in the first year, room 16 in the second year. My dorm name was Cyber, and you guys can think of various stories that would have gone behind that. So I've worked with Infosys and Jones Lang LaSalle, went to NIT Surathkal, and IIMA Ahmedabad, of course. And me and Raghu, when we started off Taxi for Sure, it was a dream that we had to solve the commute problem that we ourselves faced. This was late 2010, early 2011. And Taxi for Sure has been a story of about 3.5, 4 years. And, it changed the lives of many drivers. We started with about 5 to 10 drivers. When we sold, we were about 30,000 to 40,000 drivers, customers. We had serviced about 1 million or so customers in India by the time we sold in about 3.5 years from launch. When we started, we put in $10,000 together, which is $5,000 each, and everything came together, and we were able to sell Taxi for Sure for $200 million in 3.5 years. So that's been the Taxi for Sure story. Now, I spend quite a bit of time meeting a lot of young entrepreneurs in India. I meet at least 2 a day, which kind of shows, the entrepreneurial activity back in India, what's happening there, right? This is out of all the mails that I get, and 2 a day that I meet, and I'm sure there are lots more people meeting a lot more entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of activity, and there's going to be a tremendous future for startups in India, and hope to be part of it.
Hi, this is Kunal. I'm at the IIMA conference, and I'm an MBA dropout. I dropped out 10 years ago from NMIMS, not from IIM. Maybe that's the reason I dropped out. I don't know. It's funny. A lot of the startups in India are actually founded by engineers, and a lot of people from IIT actually. I actually have a background. I graduated in philosophy, and I did not have any engineering background per se. But I think for me, that was the reason innovation like FreeCharge happened. FreeCharge was probably one of the few original ideas that were implemented in India, where we said for every person who's recharging or doing a mobile top-up or paying his bill online, we're going to give him rewards from retailers like McDonald's, Domino's, and Pizza Hut, and so on and so forth, for transacting online for the first time. And we noticed that once the users learned to recharge online or pay their bills online, they never went back to offline methods. And I think that resulted in a very, very sticky customer base and doing frequent transaction almost once a week. India is a unique nation. We have close to 96-97% of all our mobile connections are actually prepaid, and also a unique nation where we only have close to 18 million credit or 19 million credit cards and close to 600 to 650 million debit cards, and a small percentage of both the telco customers and debit card customers actually transact online. Considering the fact that recharge online is now a 10-year-old industry, and a company that was built 5 years ago sold for almost $500 million, only 4% of the market is online. 96% of the market is still using offline methods to recharge, and hopefully will keep coming online as smartphone penetration and internet penetration grows. And it's funny because they're actively using WhatsApp and Facebook and doing all sorts of things, but they're still continuing to go to the shop to recharge. And I think India has a very unique challenge to deal with, and I call it the challenge of trust deficit. India as a country is not known for trusting each other a lot, right? We get an invoice in a restaurant, we usually check the total before we pay. When we give our car for servicing, we ensure that the fuel is almost as close to zero before we give it to the service guy. There are many such things that you will observe in India that continue to exist even today, even in the educated society. And I think that is stopping commerce to kind of thrive and really become big. I think at FreeCharge, what we did is we used an incentive to create a trial of trust, and there continue the trial of trust with obviously giving great service to our customers. So we sold our company in April to Snapdeal, and together now we are close to 90 million customers, and we see millions of transactions happening through the system on an almost weekly basis. We see, I was just talking to somebody that the infrastructure is a primary challenge, both in the physical delivery and also online delivery. When we ran our big promotions, we actually shut down the payment gateways for most of the banks for 2 hours because we ran a promotion, and we were told by the banks that you need to give us some commitments to invest in the infrastructure to handle your volumes going forward, and those are the kind of challenges we are dealing with, and we are talking about 4% of market recharging online. So interesting times. Most interesting is the confidence in the younger entrepreneurs to not take the easy approach of going abroad, taking up a job, but actually jumping into entrepreneurship. I mean, I have funded close to 18, 19 startups, and I can only see the confidence that and the quality of teams is just dramatically better than what it used to be 5 years ago. So
Kunal, interestingly, you raise infrastructure as one of the challenges, one of the things impeding innovation. Pramea, David, do you guys have any other challenges in mind, or things that you've experienced at your companies or seen at other companies that are specific to India and that are really going to matter in terms of how fast India can grow and what the future of innovation really is in this country?
Yeah, I mean, sure. From our point of view, we've just gone online in India with Myntra. We have a joint venture with Reliance as well for our stores, and regulation. Pure and simple. It's been a year, over a year, of very, very difficult work to get online in Myntra. Just via Myntra, actually setting up our own operation is a whole level of pain beyond that. So it's regulation. It's India is not open for business for retailers such as Marks and Spencer's online, in the online space in particular, and that's a massive challenge.
So, of course, infrastructure and regulations have played a big part in Taxi for Sure's story as well. But I would say, getting the right talent, has always been a challenge for Taxi for Sure, and we try to, solve that in various ways. And still, I don't think there's a formula to get right talent yet. You have to, for a startup, you have to have people with energy, passion, and an ability to think by themselves, and ability to translate a dream into reality. So those things are still just developing. It's not absent, but it'll take some more time for us to get there. As Kunal said, the entrepreneurs are getting better. I'm sure the people who are joining startups are also going to get better in the future.
And so despite these obstacles, we've seen tremendous growth and tremendous penetration in the last few years in India. If you were to look back, we're talking about the future of innovation, but what are some of the most exciting pieces of innovation that you guys have seen at your companies or at others in the last couple of years, innovation that's specific to India and that differentiates companies in the crowded space that is e-commerce?
So I'll go first. So for us, when we started off, smartphone penetration wasn't great, right? And for the drivers to start believing in smartphones was a big thing. So we were even contemplating putting in physical GPS devices versus actually using a smartphone, because we didn't trust the drivers to be actually using the smartphone well. But to our surprise, they did start buying smartphones themselves, and started using it much better. Every time we pushed out a new code for our driver side app, they would break it in a day, right? So we would have people kind of tracking as to what they would do different to break the system, right? That's one. And one innovation that we did, we had a credit system for the drivers, so they had to pay us back 10% as our take. So we would give them business and then expect them to come to the office and pay 10%, right? But in India, it didn't work, right? Half of them weren't paying. So what we did was we introduced a prepaid system. So similar to a Vodafone or an Airtel, we basically told them you top up 1,000 rupees and then you get 10,000 rupees worth of business. The day 1,000 rupees gets over, you have to come and recharge again, right? So that's what we did, and that wasn't existing anywhere else. We had to solve an Indian problem with an Indian innovation.
Yeah, I think all human behavior, including innovation, is function of how strong the motivation is. And I think what we have noticed is that when you see success stories like Freecharge, which is born out of an original idea and can see that kind of success, for the first time I'm seeing Indian startups working on original ideas versus trying to be Uber of something and Amazon of something and just trying to copycat a model from the West and try to, because the investors, unfortunately, were only betting on companies which had a market proven or a potential proven in other markets, right? For the first time, I'm seeing startups with almost no money seeing massive traction because they are truly addressing an Indian problem. I think if somebody has to just make a list of things that India is unique for compared to West, each of those ideas or items are billion-dollar ideas, because nobody will be working on those ideas because it's not something done in the West. For example, prepaid. When we started talking about prepaid customers, the biggest insight for us was that it's not that it was demonstrating the capability to pay, that's why you're on prepaid, but actually you did not want the bills to come home. So we found out the Indian youth that was affluent did not want the bills to come home because parents could check and say, hey, who are you calling this 1,000 minutes and 2000 because we have that problem in India, right? And we found that insight to be huge. And second insight, we found that women did not prefer to go to the shops to recharge because their numbers would get leaked and they would get all sorts of funny text messages and calls on their phone. So they preferred a method that is more private, right? Now, these kind of things are only possible in markets where you have these challenges, right? Where law and order can kind of have somebody kind of harassing you on a phone, or a cultural thing of parents checking your bill and actually having a say on that. It is a very interesting thing, an insight very true to India, and therefore an opportunity for somebody to build a business on top of that. So similar ways, I think every company you will see, right from cash on delivery as a thing that has been done, and Uber launched cash on delivery in India just because they just observed that the market is preferring that. Because I think we humans have this ability of just kind of picking up the path which has the least effort required, and fortunately, unfortunately, cash is the least effort method because of the regulatory situation. Again, we have two-factor authentication, poor networks. You try to pay when you are in a cab, it's almost impossible, the network fluctuations. And the connectivity is really, really bad, but it's amazing how commerce happens with that connectivity.
And so would you go, building on that point, would you go so far as to say that there is an advantage to the home side when competing with big US tech companies? Because certainly in Europe, we've had some interesting billion-dollar companies emerge here, but that haven't done so well when competing head-on with Uber, with Amazon. Is the situation different in India, given all the specificities in the market?
My view is there is definitely an advantage in the first few years till the global competition figures out what are the key things that work, right? I keep making the example of only for McDonald's to figure out in India that you have to make a spicy chicken burger and a paneer tikka thing, and then suddenly you can start eating into the market of fast food competing with the real Indian market. Same way, I think these insights are quickly discovered in a market like India, where everything is kind of becoming super transparent by the way it's working. And interestingly, there is an advantage for the home team to kind of accelerate quickly with the nuanced understanding of how Indian consumer behavior works. But when it comes to scale and technology, I think that's where most companies struggle. I think global companies have the advantage of running some large-scale systems, which kind of, so I think it's an interesting time now where we are seeing those two things kind of coming together.
David, perhaps you as a foreign retailer coming to India, how do you think about these specificities and navigating them?
I think it's a really interesting discussion because we're probably slightly further